Welcome everyone to this webinar on unlocking the latest WFM secrets. Panel today, I'm really pleased to be joined by Vossi Gordon from Modus RP. Vossi, would you like to tell everyone a bit more about yourself?
We've just done that, didn't we, Megan?
We're
doing it again.
It's
Sorry. My name is Vossi Gordon from Modus RP. We're a consultancy company supporting small to medium-sized businesses with their resource planning challenges. I myself personally have worked in resource planning for 23 years. Yeah, don't guess my age. But I've worked from the bottom, worked my way up, and then decided to go out into the world on my own. And now there's a few of us who are working within the organisation, really trying to drive resource planning into sort of smaller and medium-sized contact centres, because they can't afford the big fancy toys, but they still need resource planning. And we're also trying to break into other sectors such as the law sector, because again, resource planning can be applied in any business that has repetitive tasks that they need to do. And I'm a real advocate that resource planning is the key to success in any business.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that with everyone.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. I'm also delighted to be joined by Andrea Matsuda from NICE. Andrea, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone just joining the call?
Yes, so my name is Andrea Matsuda. I am a product marketing manager for the workforce management line of business at NICE. But before that, I was a senior manager over the workforce management team at a company. And before that, I've done every role in workforce management, mostly in RTA, but a lot in scheduling, and then also dabbled in forecasting and capacity planning, which was not my strength and not the role that I like to live in. So Vossi, it's awesome that you're so passionate about resource planning, because it's extremely difficult. And before that, I was a contact center agent. So my whole career has been in the contact center. Started as on a chat team, then did an outbound team, did inbound phones for a while, then did multiple roles in the back office world. So each role very unique and definitely has its own challenges when it comes to workforce management.
Brilliant. Well, lovely to have you with us today. Before I forget, I'm Megan Jones, and I'm the editor at Call Centre Helper. You may have seen me out and about in my pink jacket. So if you do see me at an event, come and say hello by all means. That would be lovely to have a chat. And now into some quick housekeeping before we get started. We are using the chat function in Zoom today, so you can just see at the bottom of your screen there's a little chat icon, and if you click on that, you can join in the conversation. And we've also got a replay and slides coming up later this afternoon, and you'll be able to find that at www.callcenterhelper.com/articles/recorded webinars. We are also giving out a gift card today for the best tip or question in the chat room. So make sure to join in the conversation. And if you have a question to share, use #question, and a tip to share, #tip. And we'll be coming to those with our panel later on in the session as well. Okay, so we're now just going to go to a quick poll. This will appear on the screen in a moment. Everyone should now be able to see that. So what do you use to forecast contact volumes? Are you using pen and paper, spreadsheets, WFM software, or specialist forecasting software? Vossi, what are you expecting people to be saying here?
Well, I would say spreadsheets or WFM software, although I have seen some specialist forecasting software out there, which looks quite cool and interesting. So I'd be interested to hear how many people are actually using that kind of stuff.
Okay, I think that's just coming to the end now. Most people have answered that, so I'll just end and share the results. And I think spot on, spreadsheets and WFM software, definitely the most popular there, but we have got a minority using pen and paper as well as specialist forecasting software. So quite an interesting spread of people on the call today. Okay, and then moving on. It's now time to go into your presentation, Vossi. So if I just stop sharing my screen and you open your slide deck, and we can pass the baton over.
Cool. Sorry.
Okay.
Just let me know when you can see it. Are we all good?
Yes, perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, so unlocking the latest WFM secrets. Let's crack on. So what's really important to say today is that actually the contact center again has been changing dramatically. I think 10, 15 years ago, we talked about speech analytics and the things that you could do in the IVR. Things have moved on significantly again, and we have chatbots and AI contact routing, which is really, really driving some changes within the contact center. Again, stripping out all of those easy contacts once more. I mean, you know, we've already stripped quite a lot, but now chatbots are fantastic at having some really good initial conversations and only stopping really when it gets a little bit difficult. So again, that's changing things hugely. And the AI contact routing is fantastic about really driving the right contacts to the right skilled advisor. So again, it's really, really changing the dynamics of that contact center, and be interesting to see how many people are actually using that technology at the moment. One of the other things that is major really, and is a bit of a planning nightmare, is the asynchronous interactions. So, you know, from a customer perspective, you could use any media you want on your phone. It could be emails, it could be social media, WhatsApp, whatever you want to do. You can contact most organizations on any media, and you can flip between the different medias as well. This is a logistical nightmare for planning teams, but it is the way of the world now, and it's a really important thing for us to focus on when it comes to planning. And one of the other ones that, for me as a customer, I absolutely love, but I haven't seen a huge amount of organizations using it, is the video chat option. This, I think, is fantastic for getting greater first contact resolution. Being able to see what the customer is struggling with really does help. An example of that is screen sharing and FaceTiming with my mom, who's like 74, and being able to walk through how she does things online on her phone has made things a hell of a lot easier. So, you know, the adoption of this in organizations, I think, is something that, if you aren't looking at doing it, I think it's something that will really, really help with that first contact resolution, because being able to see something and guide your customers through it is absolutely essential. But what does that mean for the planning team? Well, the problem is that many WFMs are not yet equipped to reflect this change in the contact center. A lot of these changes have come and developed, and they've developed a lot quicker than the WFM. So from what I'm seeing at the moment is that a lot of planning teams are manually trying to work out, how do we mitigate the fact that our WFM isn't designed for these kinds of medias, asynchronous being a huge one, and how do we plan for it, and how do we effectively make sure that we're not losing service level because we haven't considered the different types of contacts that are coming in and how that works. But what I wanted to talk about is that, you know, if there's more pressure on our planning teams because they're doing more of that work, there is other technology within our WFMs and other software that can help with WFMs that can mitigate that increase in workload that you might find in your planning teams. And that's where I wanted to focus on, is if you're spending a lot of time, you've got a lot of pressure to be able to try and forecast these new contacts. There are other bits of that WFM that you could utilize, which could free up some of that time. So one of them is next best action. So next best action scheduling is all about what do I need to do to mitigate some of the issues that I might be finding right now. So I've seen it on some of the tech where it will just basically say, right, volumes have spiked, you've got all of this offline activity, do you want to take it all out? You select all and done, and then it inform everyone that team meeting has been cancelled, your one-to-one's been cancelled, etc. And it's real time and it's really quick and easy. Now, a lot of people, when I've said about this before in organizations, have said, isn't that what your WFM does? Well, some WFMs do that now, but before they didn't. And a lot of planners out there will know that you would go into a schedule management screen, you would sort all your schedules, look for the ones that you could get rid of and manually do it. It's always been that way, but now we've got software and technology that will be able to do that a lot quicker, saving time within your planning team. So, you know, most of the major WFMs do that. It's worth researching whether or not your WFM and the version that you're on is capable of doing this, because again, it's that time-saving element. Okay. The other part is, you know, opening up the self-service part of the WFM for your operations. So this is about being able to give them the autonomy to do team meetings, coaching, one-to-one training, all of that kind of stuff. Being able to open up your WFM and giving that autonomy to your operational teams will free up time within your planning teams, but it also helps with engagement between ops and planning so that there isn't that friction. In many planning teams, you'll have a lot of people who are spending a lot of time on inboxes going, can you move my team meeting from here to here? Can you move my one-to-one from here to there? They're not aligned with the team manager's schedules. So therefore, there's constant administration of managing an inbox. That is totally inefficient. If you work with your operations, open up your WFM, then, you know, this is something that will really engage and work well between the two teams, but also alleviate some of that awful administration that the planning teams have to do. And I'm sure if there's some guys out there who are in the planning team who manage those inboxes, I know it's a nightmare. So it takes some time to get it configured and make sure that you're comfortable with it. But once you do, it's really worthwhile you sorting that out, and a lot of WFMs allow you to do this. And the final one is automated real-time reporting. Now, if you've ever worked in real time, Andrea, you've worked in real time, having to run a report, a real-time report every hour, every half hour, however often the ops team want it, has always been a bit of a manual thing where you run the report, you put it into a spreadsheet, send it out, or you put it into Power BI, but they need commentary as well. So you don't just have the data, you need commentary. Well, actually, some of the technology out there now will do natural language analysis and do the commentary for you. Again, you're getting rid of the administration within that planning team. You've got non-biased reporting. So this isn't about, you know, team managers said that they're doing this and anecdotally we think this is happening. This is non-biased reporting based on facts. And this is access for everyone at any time immediately. So if you know, a contact center manager goes, what's our performance today? He can find it straight away, and the reports and the everything is there instantly. This just saves a huge amount of time, absolutely huge amount of time. And you know, it's more attuned to what's actually happening. So those are the three bits of kit that are out there that are maybe not as utilized as they could be, or maybe you don't have them at the moment, but it's really worth investigating to really mitigate some of the workload that might be straining on the planning team. But the implications are obviously, for the planning team, we reduce the amount of what I call button pushers, which is really around sort of like, I just press a button or I just do some administration. And then what is really needed within your planning team is a greater need for proper analysts who will look at that information that comes from that system and challenge it. So this isn't about, you know, right, the system says yes or no, so that's where I leave it. When I talk about analysts, it's about analysts are the ones that challenge the system. The system will always do what it thinks is right, but it might not know the human element. So one of the examples that I've given before is, just say you're low on volume and it says you could have a team meeting in the next 5 minutes. Brilliant. I'll go and offer a team of 10 a team meeting. But actually, the 15 minutes before, team manager 1 was late on his team meeting, and he's always goes over his team meetings. Now, the system won't know that, but you will, because you understand your organization, you understand the contact center. So you wouldn't say, yes, I'll schedule those team meetings, because then you've got 20 people off and you'll fail service. That's where you've got to have the right analyst with the right skills to understand and challenge and take that human element as well as what the technology says. So if anyone, I can't remember which comedy program it was, but computer says yes, computer says no. You know, we don't need those in the planning team. What we need is real challengers and thinkers. And sorry to say this, but from a real-time perspective, there is that element of potentially reducing that real-time team, but utilizing them into more of the analyst and scheduling roles within the planning organization. For operations, obviously, there's an increased accountability. Now, this could be a bit of a double-edged sword. Some people might like it, some people might not, but it gives that autonomy to and accountability to the operations around where do they place their team meetings, where do they put their one-to-ones, because it's now you and not the planning team who is doing it. So you are accountable. And that, again, some people might not like it, but and we all know that that tension between planning and ops has always been there. This is a case of breaking down that barrier and not saying the evil planning team have said no. You know, it's down to you and being able to manage your operation and your teams. So success factors. Now, if you want to implement these or implement anything really within your planning team and in your workforce management, these are the 3 things. It's people, process, and systems, which I know is really, really boring, but it is absolutely 100% key that you get this right. It's tried and tested. It is absolutely important. But one of the things is what I see a huge amount of is we've invested heavily in a WFM. We've trained all the people when we got it, and then people leave. We lose that skill, and we don't reinvest in making sure that the people we bring on and the people that are left are upskilled and understand the system fully. And if you don't have that skill and you don't have that within your team, then the configuration will be outdated. And as things are moving on and as the contact center is changing, if you don't constantly review the configuration of your WFM, it will be useless. We all know rubbish data in equals rubbish data out. So you need to make sure that you invest in your WFM consistently, because then you get the real return on investment. And that comes from implementing it correctly, skilling your people correctly, and using experts if you need to, whether that be independents or your vendors, professionals. Make sure that you are constantly reviewing and making sure that that system is working for you. But what comes with that is the process. it's the really boring bit that, like, you know, I like implementing process, but do I like following them? No, most probably not, but it's key. Standardization of processes is key. You know, you can't have one department doing something a different way from another. And when we talk about processes, we're talking about the interactions. So from earlier, the comment around that interaction with marketing, your process needs to make sure that you have all of the right inputs and outputs within your WFM, within the different departments, so that you understand how this whole planning engine works for your contact center. And that process is so key for success. I hate laboring the point, but you know, those interactions with other teams like finance, payroll, HR, marketing, sales, even transformation are really, really key. And that's where you get that process in place to make sure that that happens. And then people-wise, so people and planning, I'm a real advocate of having people who are challengers, people who fail fast but try. You know, the important thing is you've got people who are really energetic about driving change and driving new ways and better ways of working. So for me, whenever I had a planning team, the people that I look for are the people with the will, the energy, and the enthusiasm. The skill can be taught. You can be taught and trained on your WFM, you can be taught and trained on Excel, but if you don't have the drive and the ambition and the real energy to make changes, then, you know, you're going to stay in that same bubble that you've always been in. And then the world moves on and you'll be left behind. So for me, having innovative and experimental people within your planning team is 100% key. I woke up the other day and I thought, oh, do you know what? I was thinking about this webinar. I was thinking, do you know what? The thing with technology for me is that those who are afraid of technology become a slave to it. You shouldn't be afraid of technology. Technology works for you. It was made by humans and it is managed by humans. You take advantage of that. Another webinar I was on, we were talking about, actually, you're looking at lazy people, and I could say that I'm a lazy person. Lazy people are the ones who find the most efficient way of doing something, because who wants to do something again and again and again? So people who want to find efficiencies will love technology because it opens up and frees your time to do interesting stuff. So again, that people part is really, really important. And all I'd say to you is there is no magic pill. There is no like, if I do this one thing, everything will be fine. But for me, adaptability is 100% key. Your WFM is only as good as the way you configure it and the way that you use it. If you've got one now, have a look at what version you're on, what are you utilizing, what can you utilize more of. Then if you haven't got some of that tech that's available, what's the return on investment? A planning team can pay for itself. We are 100%, we are 100% benefit rich. You know, we come up with those ideas on how to be more efficient and effective. So all I'd say is really, really drive and look at what you can do with your WFM now, and then look at technology afterwards. And thanks for listening. I hope that was useful and helpful, and welcome any questions at the end. Thank you very much. And I'll hand you over to Megan, is it first?
Yes, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on that. I particularly liked the idea about getting the right people with the right mindset. I think, you know, if they're the ones always looking for efficiencies and ways to do things better, you're onto a winner, and looking for those people in your team and, you know, utilizing what they're thinking and saying. So yeah, thank you so much for that. We're now going on to look at some of the things that have been said in the chat room for our top tips and questions. So we've had a tip in from Andy, who said, when presenting back an intraday view of service, make sure to highlight when actual service level is exceeding forecast service level at this time, especially when actual service level is still below target. It can be too easy to focus on not hitting target when we never planned to do at this interval. For example, a massive spike demand for a very short interval, you would never staff to with planned recovery throughout the day. Thanks for sharing that, Andy. Andrew, do you have any thoughts on that one?
No, that's spot on. We do tend to focus on the, I would say, like the opportunities, right? Instead of, celebrating the successes. And, you're spot on. You want to level out. There's always going to be peaks and valleys throughout the day. Of course, there is ways to try to make that better and more automated. There's some tools out there that can help, trying to get net staffing to your optimal goal so you can level out those peaks and valleys, but 100% you're not going to staff for a 15-minute interval that that you're going to suffer and then know that you're going to smooth out throughout the whole day.
Thank you for that. We've had a question from Ian, who said, as they become more advanced, what impact do you think large language models will have on the call center environment? Vossi, do you want to have a stab at answering that one? It's a big question.
It is. I think more advanced, what impact do you think large language models Ian, I think I need you to elaborate on what you mean by language models to be able to answer this one. Are you talking about the coding language models, or are you talking about language in general? Is my question to be able to answer that one.
Okay, maybe Ian, if you can elaborate a bit in the chat room, we can maybe come back to that one shortly. We've had a tip in from Nick, who said, make a note of any event or unforeseen activity that impacted your scheduling and what you did about it as you go through your current year, so that when you come to plan going forward, you can refer back to what happened at the same time last year and consider whether that event might reoccur. Andrew, what do you think of that as a best practice piece of advice?
I mean, absolutely. You want to make notes of it. I mean, it's a whole process. Obviously, if you're one person doing the job, you probably make yourself notes so you can report back to operations. But when you've got these really large WFM teams, if your intraday team, who's usually doing the reporting functionality, doesn't let the planning team know, that's not going to help solve the situation going forward. So you do want to absolutely make notes of these and communicate.
I can go back to Ian's question. So he's talking about ChatGPT. I think this is going to have a massive impact on the contact center. I love ChatGPT. I use it all the time. I ask it absolutely everything. It can write me all sorts of brilliant stuff, and it does VBA code. So all you nerds out there, if you ask it a VBA code question, it will do it for you, which is fantastic, a great way of learning. But from a contact center perspective, again, I think it could reduce again more of the contact that's required in the contact center as you train it. So if you've ever used it yourself, if you say, write it as if you were an expert, blah, 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 you home in on it. So again, it changes the contact center and what can be done and what can be automated, but you still need to configure it. You still need to make sure that you are comfortable with its tone, what kind of answers it's saying, etc. So there's still a lot of work and there's still a lot of people that would need to manage that so that it is aligned to what your company values are and how you want to deal with your customers. But it's going to change things massively. So I think in the next 5 years, we're going to see this explode even more in the contact center. And to be honest, I'm really excited about it, but I do like tech, so.
And yeah, thank you for elaborating on that, Ian, for jumping back in. That was really great. Ed, we've had a tip in from Deborah who says, don't try to manage everything, utilize the expertise on your team. We've had another question in from Damien who said, what size call centre does WFM software benefit, and what WFM technique is best for a small call centre with 6 reps? Andrea, is that one that you can answer?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not, I want to say it's a great question for one, but sometimes we really focus on size instead of processes. We actually have a customer who has 16 agents and actually just won an award for Trailblazer Award at our Big Interactions event a couple of weeks ago. There's 16 agents, but they did some amazing things in automating their processes with our software. And it kind of more depends on how complex your business is. So typically, we like to say if you're over like industry standards, usually if you have more than 50 agents, you're probably gonna want to be on software instead of doing things manually. But again, I have a customer that has 16 agents and they use software because they have some pretty complex processes that they can't do manually.
Great, and thank you for shedding light on what that means for smaller call centres. Okay, and we've had another tip in from Rashta who said regularly review and analyse key metrics such as agent utilisation, customer satisfaction and agent turnover rates to assess the impact of scheduling decisions on both demand and agent satisfaction. Bossy, what do you think of that one, especially the agent satisfaction element? How important is that?
In the labour market, as we know today, it is very, very challenging. And this is across different industries and across different sectors, etc. Agent attrition has always been a massive, massive thing. But now it's even more prevalent because people will choose roles that are more flexible. So you don't necessarily have to have a contact center in your area. You can work from home, right? So it is really, really agent satisfaction is so key right now, because actually what can you do and what can you do and be creative as a planning team to be able to engage with your colleagues and your advisors, because it is a very difficult market now and the churn within contact centers is increasing massively.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing your insight on that, and great tip, Rashta. I'm just going to jump over to a poll now. So we should be able to see that in a second. Bear with. Apologies. There we go. Okay, so what do you find most difficult to forecast? You're looking at phone calls here, live chat, SMS, social media, where you've got volatility or seasonal trends, staffing levels, or back office work. Andrea, what are you expecting people to say here?
Some of these are all asynchronous interactions. So chat, SMS, social media, and back office. I think it's hard to say, but I think all of them could be top contenders.
Okay, I'll just give everyone a moment more to take part. There's a few more responses just coming in. And Vossi, what are you expecting to see?
Yeah, I would say the same. We've been working with phone calls, seasonal trends and back office and staffing levels for a while now. I think the new contacts are the ones that are going to cause a bit more difficulty from a forecasting perspective.
Okay, let's just share the results. Yeah, live chat's definitely coming up. There's one of the newer channels that's harder to manage. We've got social media, but also where there's some seasonal trends and back office work as well. So quite a spread there. Okay, so now we are going to jump across to your presentation, Andrea. So if I'll just stop sharing my screen, if you can share your slide deck and we'll crack on.
All right, hopefully everyone can see the right screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. So just to start with this, I love the last poll question because it kind of leads in nicely to the different mediums that Vossi also talked on. So essentially as customers and consumers, we all have our own channel that we prefer, especially when you think about all the different generations, both in the labor market, but even in the consumer market. You've got your millennials who are more likely to want to do self-service or use chat, probably not pick up the phone. And then you have your generation, like my parents, for example, are boomers, and they definitely want to always, they're never going to use self-service or chat. They're always going to pick up the phone and want to resolve things that way. And then you have people like me who do both at the same time. I'm the most obnoxious consumer, where I'm doing self-service, chatting, and on the phone call because I want to get the quickest answer as fast as possible. And I'm probably not the only obnoxious person that does that. So you think about, these companies have done a great job really responding to these consumer demands, but all of these different channels have caused complications where they are asynchronous, and also you have to staff more people because you are offering more ways to communicate with your customers. And that obviously leads to some challenges when you think about the different channels you have, especially if you have a social media team that uses WhatsApp, Facebook, Twitter, and multiple different types of channels. So some cautionary tales is we have seen some people who just adopt channels. They've adopted social media, they've adopted chat, but they treated it like a phone call from a planning perspective. And it does get a little complicated because it's not really an apples to apples situation. You do have things such as concurrency issues. You're not usually taking one chat or one social chat at a time. You're taking multiples. So you can't treat it like a single phone call. But if I do that, I'm going to have inaccurate long range planning. So I'm not going to have the right resources in play. I'm going to be building inefficient schedules off of those assumptions. I'm going to be challenged to make sure that the skills are in the right place for the right channels. When my former contact center implemented chat, we often were just playing whack-a-mole all day long. We were moving people from phones to chat, and we actually had a back office ticket team that they got behind on work because we were pulling them off to help the phones, and then their work was behind, and then we're pulling people off the phones to help their work, and it just was a constant game of whack-a-mole, and not very successful. And honestly, it made the agents really disgruntled too, because we're not setting them up for success to hit their own KPIs, because we're constantly pulling them to do one task to do another, and people just usually aren't as efficient when they're being pulled back and forth every day. And obviously each medium has its own type of KPIs, so it became really difficult for them as agents to achieve their KPIs, and definitely created some tension. And then of course we're going to have inaccurate requirements to forecast, and all of that can really result in bad CSAT scores. So again, if I'm having long wait times in a certain area, your customer, even if you have the best experience in the world, they're probably not very satisfied. I had to call the airline the other day, and I waited 58 minutes before talking to an agent. This is why I always chat at the same time. But the person on the phone was very helpful. The most friendly agent I could have talked to, got my issue resolved way quicker than the agent I was chatting with. Lovely person, but I was on the line for 58 minutes. So I already wasn't going to give a great survey result when the survey came back. Of course, if it can be agent specific, which I always encourage people to do, you can leave a positive survey, but the overall interaction, was not positive. So, can decrease your CSAT and also increase costs. So if you're constantly playing whack-a-mole, you're going to be moving your resources around. One of your channels is always understaffed. So you have to hire more people to staff these various channels, which of course salary costs can be very expensive. So I want to talk a little bit about asynchronous channels and long duration work, and really what that means. Sometimes we tend to throw out these words, but it's not necessarily understood what that actually means. Oh, my slide just went berserk, so I guess I can talk about it. There we go. So synchronous interactions are your standard phone. Think about a phone call, whether it's inbound or outbound. It's a conversation or dialogue that's going on between your employee and the customer. And there may be pauses. Of course, you may have to put someone on hold to go, do some research and get back to them, but they're not usually very long pauses. They're definitely not going to go on for hours, hopefully not, definitely not for days. When you get into asynchronous interactions, think about back office tickets, think about emails, think about even chats where you can talk to someone. The customer may walk away, maybe you chatted over your lunch break, and then now you get back to work and you resume your chat in the afternoon. So I might chat in with Megan on my lunch break, and then I chatted at the end of the day. Megan's now off shift, but Vasi's taken over my chat. So there's multiple situations where an interaction could go on for several hours, or even, when you think about emails, several days where you're waiting for an exchange to go back and forth. So there's often frequent pauses that are really going to make planning for those interactions extremely difficult and challenging. So to think about just how a real life example that would be, I just want to talk about an email, because I think it's probably the easiest one. I think we've all sent and replied to emails before. So we have a customer here, they send an email to the employee. The employee receives the email. It takes them 2 minutes to read and respond to the email. They send a response back, and now there's a 5-minute period where they're responding back to the customer, but then the customer has a 60-minute delayed in their response. So whether the customer didn't see it right away, maybe it took them an actual hour to respond. We don't know why, but whatever the reason is, it took them 60 minutes to respond. Then there's a third email where the customer then responds to the employee, and the employee is now able to successfully wrap up the interaction and close out the interaction. Very high level example, but the business problem is, why are my slides are being so goofy? The business problem is, was this one contact that lasted 10 minutes? Was it one contact that lasted 70 minutes? Or is it 3 separate interactions that lasted 3 minutes and 20 seconds? And every time I've asked this question in the panel, and feel free to put in the chat, how you would do this. Everyone does it differently. Everyone would calculate this differently and account for this interaction differently. And this is just one example of an email. Imagine if you're doing multiple concurrent channels at once. If you're doing multiple, Facebook messages at the same time, it gets extremely complicated quick. And then the second follow-up question is, what interval should the information be reported in? Should it be when the contact started, when the contact ended, which is how workforce management systems are calculating things today? Or should it be in the interval where the work was actually performed? What I'm driving at is the current paradigms of today is really resisting this blending of work. So we're seeing that today people and contact centers really expect our operational contacts to be blended. We're seeing that need for the multi-skilled agent. Vasi mentioned the high attrition rates, and the reason why we need to keep people, especially during this turbulent economy where we're really striving to do more with less. We're seeing that need to blend and drive more efficiency, but that can be really challenging with our current tools out there today. So for example, today we're seeing forecasts are based on the work item when it's completed, not when the work was actually performed. So again, there was that 70 minutes calculation where there was a full 60 minutes where there was actually no work being done on that interaction. Work items today are assumed to be synchronous, so we're treating them like phone calls on the back end when we're doing the planning perspective. And then we also have when the average handle time is shorter than the planning interval, that causes its own inaccuracies. And we're also assuming that work items are processed by a single employee when, in fact, if you have these long interactions, there's a chance that you're talking to multiple people. Otherwise, if someone's on their PTO or they're on their weekend, you're waiting for multiple days to get a response back. So more often than not, you're talking to multiple employees to get your issue resolved. We're also assuming that the employee is working no more than one work item concurrently, which let's hope that's not true, because that would be very expensive salary dollars if you're just having that one person wait the whole time for the email response. That would just be someone sitting there for 60 minutes waiting for the email response to come in. Hopefully they're moving on to the next email and they're staying busy. And then we're also assuming that the work item resolved in a single channel, when often the customer journey is far more complicated than that. Most likely customers are going online, doing self-service. They might be talking to a chat bot. From there, they might go to a live agent. It might get escalated where it's even more complicated than the permissions on the chat allow. So then maybe they have to actually call in. And they might even have to do a follow-up email, send in some documentation. So they're very often you have a full customer journey that really goes across various channels for one interaction. So additional things, really the nature of work is changing. So we're seeing this more omni-channel blended environment from a digital perspective, but even bringing in the back office. We're seeing, Vasi also mentioned this, but bots are being introduced. And while they are definitely helping alleviate some of the volume, they do create their own challenges. When you think about, they're usually handling the more simple interactions. And on the flip side of that is your actual agents are going to be left with the more complicated escalations that are usually going to have a higher handle time. So again, real life example, we introduced chat at one of my companies expecting, oh, this chatbot's going to change our world. It's going to take away all of this volume. And actually it did. But the problem was is our average. We were a tech company, so we had a very complicated product. The chatbot took away all of the easy, I forgot how to log into my account questions. So our average handle time jumped significantly because all of those easy, quick interactions were gone, and it left the agents with really long, more complicated tech questions. And we actually had to hire even more people because, our average handle time grew. Currently, we're waiting until the contact ended, and as we're going to see in a minute, sometimes that can cause inaccuracies when we're doing our staffing planning. So really waiting until the contact ended can be waiting until too late from a planning perspective. We need to normalize the smallest planning interval for blended work items. So again, thinking about that blended work environment. And the work item decomposition. So we actually have to decompose both synchronous and asynchronous items into activity-based work history. So thinking again, when the activity occurred and when the activity was worked, not just the start to end of the interaction. And again, that leads me into activity-based WFM when we're thinking about the activity, when we're thinking what activity is going to be performed, when we're thinking about planning our staffing requirements. So all of this to say, what does this mean? And in the spirit of the fact that this is called Unlocking the Secrets of WFM, I do actually want to share a secret that NICE is ready to go to market with. It's something that we have termed true to interval analytics. It is something that we have filed a patent on and is going to be in our software with our next release, which will be Q1 next year. But from an ACD perspective, we're expecting it to be in a couple of months, actually. So what is true interval analytics? Well, first, let's start with how we decided we needed to do this. So challenges with long interactions. So again, I've got my slides are being so goofy. There we go. So today we're doing everything with when a contact ended. So this is how WFM systems are handled today. So for this very basic example, we have a contact that arrived at 9:10 a.m. and it's completed at 9:40 a.m. So you can see here from a planning perspective, we see it came in at 9:10, so that 9 a.m. interval, I'm calculating that one contact was received, but it has a 0 handle time, so I don't need anyone at this point in time, according to my calculations today. At the 9:15 interval, I've got 0 received, 0 handled, so I need 0 people. Well, at the 9:30 interval, I show that I handled one contact and it had a 30-minute handle time, so I need 2 people. Sometimes this works, especially for synchronous interactions. So when contacts arrive and the work is completed in the same interval, there's no issues with calculating it this way. When intervals are longer than handle times, it's also fine to do this, but it does create problems when handle times are long or intermittent. So again, if we have pauses during our interactions and they span over multiple intervals, it also creates complications when the intervals are shorter than the handle times. So then when we think about if this is a chat and I'm doing 3 chats at once and there's in focus time and there's other times where the chat's paused or interrupted or in queue time, you can see how it can get inaccurate very quickly. So what is true interval analytics? Well, we've added 2 new fields called answered and active from our ACD into the WFM system. So now we're going to do that same example. At the 9 a.m. interval, we're going to see one contact was received and it was answered at this interval. So now I had a 5-minute handle time. So let's say I needed 0.33 of a person to handle this interaction. At the 9:15 interval, it shows that I have 1 active interaction going on with a 15-minute handle time. So I need 1 person. And then at the 9:30 interval, I have 1 active contact going on. It ended at 9:40. I had a 10-minute handle time. So I needed 0.6 of a person. So again, this is going to solve the issue where before I was showing that I needed 2 people when the contact ended. Now I'm actually capturing that I needed 1 person to answer the contact and handle it when it was actually going on, and it's not overstaffing me at the end of the interval. So a very high level example of how this can solve challenges and really just drive our efficiency and accuracy. So this is a paradigm shift. That's how we're terming it. It's really changing from the mindset of reporting when contacts ended to when they actually occurred. So capturing the activity-based planning. This is going to be extremely beneficial when we think about digital channels, when we think about chat and social media, SMS, but also from a back office perspective when we think about cases and tickets. So again, really changing that mindset to help capture and drive our accuracy to get interval-specific activity-based planning. A lot of the benefits, of course, the main one is accuracy. The whole point of workforce management forecasting is we're trying to get as accurate as possible with our planning. So it's just going to drive better forecast accuracy and improve our forecast arrival patterns. It's also going to resolve the deviation errors that happens when you get low to medium volume queues. This particularly happens when you've got multiple concurrency issues going on at once, and you've got that in focus time where that gets introduced. And again, just aligning schedules, but in addition, I focused on this as well, and Vasi also touched on this, but it's going to help solve the problem with asynchronous interactions. So really driving forward that blended contact operational efficiency, thinking about decomposing back office work items into the common planning period, and also from a digital perspective, decomposing those interactions to actually based when the work actually occurred, staffing when people are actually needing to be there to answer the actual live interaction, not the full start to finish when there's a lot of, we'll say, dead time in between. And again, just improving overall cost and user control and the staffing requirements. Currently, this is something that is exclusive to NICE with both our ACD and our WFM solutions. So as I mentioned, there is a patent filed for the WFM side, and right now it does work with our own ACD provider. So that question definitely comes up. And then my last secret and tip for everyone was digital is a journey. It's not just a one and done. It's not I have digital and now we're good to go. We can serve our customers. In fact, everything you see on my screen here, including average handle time longer than the SAT and employee cognitive load times, all of these are attributes that need to be considered when we think about digital. These are things that NICE is considering and everything that we're trying to work on to make sure that our solution is able to handle all of these tasks. So digital is a journey. It's not a one and done, and that is my tip for all of you today. And with that, if you have any questions, this is my contact information. Feel free to reach out. And then Megan, I think I'm turning it back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that secret with us. We've also already had a comment in the chat room that just says, this is awesome. So that's really great to see. I'm just going to launch a quick poll now as well. If anyone would like to see more of a deep dive in the demonstration of the NICE solution, if you just want to fill in the poll quickly now. Vasi, what difference do you think this will make to the companies that are adopting this technology?
What, like I said in my presentation, I think this is for NICE to be able to have thought of this and built something, it is massive for NICE users, and definitely a real advantage of using NICE. If you've got it already, then I would definitely start thinking about speaking to your provider and having a look at whether or not you can get this, because it is a difficult problem to solve, especially in that intraday piece. When you're doing capacity planning at a higher level, it's a little bit easier, but that intraday profiling, it's the same when multi-skilling, etc. The systems can do it well, and the fact that NICE have come up with this is I think is fantastic news for planners.
Thank you. We're just conscious of time now. We've got, I think, a bit of time to just rattle through a few last tips and questions from the audience before we wrap up. So we've had a tip in from Andy. It says, make sure you factor chat concurrency into your staffing calculations and forecasting when scheduling agents. If agents are only able to handle one chat concurrently, they would be more efficient staffing a voice channel where there is normally a quicker customer response, allowing agents that can handle multiple chats concurrently to be prioritized and to make better use of idle time between chats. And thank you for that, Andy. We've had another tip in from Bill, who says you can achieve better buy-in in implementing WFM by explaining the why behind it and the purpose behind what the results can be. This includes the front line all the way up to director level. Do you have anything to add there, Andrew, and explaining the why and getting this technology in place?
Yes, I mean, you have to, I Bill, this rings to my heart. I had to campaign very hard to try to move us into a WFM system because frankly, operations, they've got a lot of things they have to consider from a cost perspective. So you have to explain why this is going to be a cost savings to them and that there's going to be an ROI with it. Otherwise, I think they're just spending a lot of money for a system. So you absolutely have to show a proven ROI and how it's going to drive efficiency.
Fantastic. Oh, great question, Bill. Just moving on, we've had another tip in from Rika, who said, invest in plasma screens in each department, inbound and outbound, where real-time reports can be viewed by all, providing queue status reports, service levels, number of calls received, calls abandoned, average handle times, routing states, etc. for each extension in your call center. We've had an opinion in as well, saying a real-time nudge to the agents on their desktops with pop-ups or mobile apps about how they're doing against the KPIs like adherence they're measured on is also something that should be considered important in today's world. Bossy, what's your opinion on pop-ups and things like this, on telling agents they're doing a good job?
Yeah, gamification, being able to sort of really let agents know how well they're doing, as well as, it's not always a stick. There's some carrot stuff here as well. And there's a lot of WFM providers who provide some really good tools for that. And I absolutely agree. My only caution is just making sure that it doesn't detract from them being able to service the customer. So those nudges can't be a little bit like we were talking about earlier around us doing the presentation, and then suddenly a nudge comes up from Teams and a message. You don't want to distract the agents, the advisors, from doing their job, but we must absolutely recognize when they've done a great job as well. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Fantastic. And that's all we've got time for. So in one or two words, if everyone could just put, what did you like best about today's webinar in the chat room? I'm also pleased to share the winning tip is coming from Deborah, who said, tell a story with your analytics. Don't just share the numbers, show the impacts. I think, Andrea, that comes back to the why that we were just talking about, of proving the ROI and the worth of having this in place. And just to note before we wrap up as well, if you can complete the survey as you leave the webinar. It's just 3 questions long. That just helps us in making our webinars the best that they can be. And just a reminder as well that the replay and slides for today's webinar will be online later this afternoon. So they're available at www.callcenterhub.com/articles/recorded webinars. And all that's left now is to say thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Bossy.
No problem. Thank you.
And thank you, Andrea.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And thank you so much. And just to say to everyone, we're having a bit of a break for our webinars over the summer, but we'll be back in September with our autumn series. And that's everything. Thank you.